"Help! Help!" He won't let go. Peter's scream tore through the stadium, desperate, high-pitched and broken with fear. For a second, everything froze. The music stopped. The crowd fell silent, then began to scream. From the edge of the pool, a training partner shouted, "Emergency protocol, jump the net, jump the net." But the net didn't move. Another coach ran to reach the call box, his hands shaking as he pressed the alarm. Kanak isn't responding. He's not responding. In the stands, children were crying. Parents had their hands over their mouths. Cell phones appeared, recording the horror in real time. Peter emerged one last time, blood staining his face, his mouth barely able to form the words, "Please help me." Then Kanak pulled him down again, and this time listen to the story. February 17, the hot afternoon at Oceanic World. The stands were packed, children laughing, cameras flashing a spectacle of nature tamed, or so they thought. Peter Harris was the face of the park, an experienced trainer, 15 years with orcas, fearless, respected, adored. But behind the curtain of applause, there was a predator, 5,400 kilos of power, a mind shaped by years of confinement. And that day, something snapped. In less than 5 minutes, a family-friendly performance would turn into a life-and-death struggle that no one could stop, and Peter Harris would never resurface. You're watching Wild Encounters, where the most shocking encounters with animals come to life. If this story captivated you, don't forget to subscribe, like, and share, because what you're about to see is just the beginning. Peter Harris wasn't just a trainer, he was the trainer. What you would see on all the flyers, all the promotional videos, and all the guided tours at Oceanic World in Los Angeles. For 15 years, Peter gave everything to the park and the orcas that lived within its imposing glass walls. He wasn't just performing alongside them, he lived for them. To the public, he was charismatic. To his colleagues, he was fearless. To the whales, he was family. He started as a part-time feeder when he was just 19, a biology student with a quiet passion for marine life. But it didn't take long for his supervisors to notice something different about him. Peter had a way with animals, especially orcas. They respond to his voice, his presence, even his silence. At 25, he was already an elite trainer. At 30, he was the head of Oceanic World's Orca program. His colleagues called him the Whale Whisperer. He never used fear, never raised his voice, never forced a performance, and somehow the orcas followed him. But that connection came at a cost. Peter logged more free dives, those rare unprotected swims inside the tank, than any other trainer. He believed that trust was stronger than protocol. Even when others raised concerns, Peter simply ignored them. He used to say, if you treat them like killers, that's what they'll become. If you treat them like partners, they'll protect you. And for 15 years they did, until one didn't. Kanak was no ordinary whale. He was born in captivity. 5,400 kilos of muscle, intelligence and instinct, raised behind glass walls and raised under stadium lights. He had never felt the open sea, never felt the call of nature. From his first breath, he was trained to perform. The trainers said he was calculating, observant, quiet, in a way that made even the most experienced nervous. While other orcas responded enthusiastically to signals, Kanak often hesitated, not out of confusion, but out of deliberation, as if he were thinking about every command, every movement, every choice. Over time, Kanak gained a reputation not as the star of the show, but as the unpredictable one. In 2017, during a routine swimming session, Kanak broke formation. Without warning, he dove under a junior coach and grabbed her leg, pulling her down for nearly 45 seconds. She surfaced, gasping, terrified, clutching her knee. The park issued a brief statement calling the incident minor, describing the behavior as playful curiosity, but among staff rumors emerged. That wasn't play, it was power. Kanak had been involved in other incidents too, refusing to return to the containment areas, smearing his tail on the doors, refusing food, unless it was given by specific trainers. And yet, because he never caused serious harm, the show went on. Some believe Kanak acted this way due to stress. Others said he was lonely. Whatever the reason, one thing was certain. No one fully understood what was going on in Kak's mind. Not even Peter. And on February 17, that lack of understanding would prove fatal. Oceanic World was built on dreams. Dreams of connecting people with the ocean's most majestic creatures. But behind the polished glass tanks and choreographed splashes was a story that most visitors never saw. Over the past 2 decades, Oceanic World had been cited numerous times for safety violations. Trainers injured during rehearsals inadequate. Safety barriers, faulty emergency equipment, falsified reports. Each time the park paid a fine, made a statement and moved on. Behind the scenes, the orcas were often pushed to their limits. Exhausting performance schedules, limited stimulation, isolation when they didn't cooperate, and as the animals became more unpredictable, management became more aggressive in discipline and denial. Whistleblowers had come forward before. Former employees claimed that the park ignored warning signs, downplayed injuries, and punished trainers who raised concerns. Most were fired. Some were silenced with confidentiality agreements. Peter Harris wasn't one to rock the boat, but even he started asking questions. He had requested more time off for Kanak, expressed concern about his behavioral changes, and pushed for a temporary pause in free-diving performances. But the pressure to perform was relentless. Ticket sales were high, the show was the main attraction, and Peter was the face of it all. He was assured that everything was fine, that protocols were in place, that Kanak was just acting out. So Peter did what he always did. He trusted the system. He trusted the whale. And on the afternoon of February 17th, he climbed onto that platform once again. February 17th began like any other show day. The sky over Los Angeles was clear. Sunlight reflected off the surface of the Orca pool. Tourists filed into the stands holding popcorn and cameras. Children leaned over the railings, waiting for a splash. The speakers blared with lively music. It was packed. Every seat was taken. Backstage, Peter Harris prepared himself the way he always did, quietly, meticulously. He went over the performance list with the crew, checked the cues, and got dressed. But before the crowd arrived, he took his usual time alone with Kanak. For 30 uninterrupted minutes, Peter rehearsed inside the tank, just him and the whale. Observers said everything seemed normal. Kanak followed every command, gliding through the water, playfully nudging Peter as he rose. There were no warning signs, no aggression, just routine. But some trainers now remember something different, something they didn't notice until it was too late. Kanak's pace was slightly faster than usual, his eyes more fixed. He didn't vocalize during the hand signals as he normally did. And when Peter turned his back, Kanak's fin moved. At 2:03 p.m. the show began. Peter ran to the wet platform, waving to the audience, applauding him. The loudspeakers roared with his name. Kanak climbed up beside him to thunderous applause, wetting the first 5 rows with a dramatic splash from his tail. It was a flawless opening. Then Peter dove in. The crowd exploded. It was the highlight of every performance, the leap of trust. Trainer and Orca swimming side by side, a symbol of harmony between man and beast. Kanak swam around him once, then twice slower on the second lap. Peter reached out his hand, the signal for the synchronized pirouette. But Kanak didn't turn. He made another lap, this time closer. His dorsal fin cut through the water like a blade. Peter smiled, still unaware. To the audience, it looked like part of the act. What they didn't see or recognize were the subtle signs. Kanak's breathing quickened. His tail struck the water once with force. His pectoral fins moved out of rhythm, and then he disappeared beneath the surface. Peter floated, looking around. The music continued. The audience applauded, waiting for the big jump. But Kanak wasn't preparing to jump. He was preparing to attack. At 2:08 p.m., the illusion shattered. Without warning, Kanak rose from below, launching himself upward with terrifying speed. He hit Peter in the upper torso, lifting him out of the water before throwing him back down with overwhelming force. Witnesses later said they heard a crack not from the speakers, but with their own ears. The unmistakable sound of a body breaking under pressure. Then a scream, not from Peter, but from the crowd. Blood appeared within seconds. At first, people thought it was part of the show, a special effect, a trick. But when the water turned from clear blue to a red blur, the excitement gave way to confusion, then horror. Kanak didn't let go. He dragged Peter down deep into the tank. The water went quiet. 10 seconds passed, then 20, then 30. Suddenly, Peter's body broke the surface limp, only for Kanak to grab him again, this time by the leg. Trainers on the deck were already moving. Alarms sounded over the sound system. A team member shouted, "Emergency protocol, clear the pool." Peter was submerged again, out of breath, out of control, just brute force. A lifeguard ran to the emergency mast, a 3-meter aluminum pole used to distract whales in rare situations like this. 2 others ran to the gate release to try to separate Kanak to the medical pool, but Kanak was not responding to signals. He ignored the alarm, ignored the underwater tones, ignored the screams. He was not playing. With horrible clarity, it became evident. This was an attack. A trainer threw a bucket of bait into the water, a desperate attempt to redirect Kanak's attention. He didn't move. He surfaced just enough for everyone to see Peter's body in his mouth, still, barely conscious arms outstretched toward the surface before being pulled down again. The crowd was being evacuated now. Children were crying. Parents covered their eyes. Others stood frozen, immobilized by what they were witnessing. This wasn't just a violation of protocol, it was a total breakdown. The whale was no longer under human control. Every second felt like an eternity. Every failed rescue attempt further eroded hope. Peter surfaced once more, barely. Blood was streaming from his mouth, one eye was swollen shut, and then came the final moment. Kanak did what looked like a leap, jumping halfway out of the water and landing with Peter beneath him. The water exploded, then silence. No bubbles, no movement. Peter Harris did not resurface. The attack lasted 5 minutes. 5 minutes that changed everything. When Kanak sank beneath the surface with Peter's body, the stadium was in chaos. The crowd had already been evacuated, but behind the scenes, panic reigned. Protocols were in place to prevent this. Emergency nets that could isolate the tank gates that isolated the whales in seconds, but none of it worked. The gates jammed. The nets were never deployed. Kanak remained in the main pool, circling slowly, dragging Peter's lifeless body behind him. Every few minutes he would surface, as if mocking the team, as if asserting his control. Peter had already been underwater for more than 7 minutes. Finally, after repeated attempts and strong underwater signals, Kanak released him. The body floated to the surface, motionless. A dive team rushed to the scene. They pulled Peter out of the water and lifted him onto the platform. His wetsuit was torn. Blood gushed from a deep cut in his ribs. One arm hung at an abnormal angle. His lips were blue. CPR began immediately. Chest compressions and rescue breaths were repeated. A paramedic at the scene later said it was the longest 10 minutes of his life, trying to bring back the breath of a man who had no air left. At 2:41 p.m., Peter Harris was pronounced dead. The official autopsy listed blunt force trauma to the chest and head, multiple rib fractures, internal bleeding and drowning as the cause of death. But those who knew him, who worked alongside him for years, knew the truth went deeper. A former trainer who asked to remain anonymous said later, "He didn't stand a chance, and we knew Kanak had it in him. We all knew it. We just hoped it wouldn't come to this." Peter trusted the process. He trusted the whale, he trusted the institution, and in the end, that trust cost him his life. News of Peter Harris's death spread faster than the cleanup crews could drain the blood from the pool. By nightfall, national headlines read, "Veteran trainer killed by killer whale at Oceanic World." Images of screaming children and horrified parents flooded social media. Clips of the attack, shaky, grainy but unmistakable, were analyzed on live broadcasts, news panels and talk shows. Outside the gates of Oceanic World, the first candlelight vigil began less than 24 hours after the attack. Former visitors, trainers, strangers, they gathered in silence holding photos of Peter. Some cried, others remained in stunned disbelief. To them, Peter wasn't just another trainer. He was the face of Oceanic World, the man who made the whales seem gentle, safe, magical. Now that illusion had been shattered by the very creature he had spent his life trusting. Oceanic World responded quickly, at least on the surface. The park suspended Orca shows out of respect. Press releases were carefully worded. Phrases like tragic accident and unforeseen event dominated the headlines. Spokespeople offered condolences. They promised internal investigations, they promised changes. But behind the scenes, a different story was unfolding. 2 weeks later, an internal government safety report was leaked to the press. The findings were damning. Over the past 3 years, Oceanic World had violated federal safety protocols at least 12 times. Gate mechanism failures, unreported close calls, poorly trained staff, signs of animal behavior, ignored or dismissed. Peter Harris's own emails, expressing concern about Canucks' aggression, were included in the report. The public was outraged. Animal rights activists took to the streets. Protesters lined up outside marine parks across the country. Hashtags calling for an end to orca captivity trended worldwide. Petitions garnered millions of signatures in days. What began as a tragedy became a movement. Peter Harris was now more than a headline. His name became a rallying cry for reform, for justice, for every trainer who has ever been told to smile in the face of fear, and for every animal confined in a tank who should never have lived in one. Peter Harris died doing what he loved, working with the animals he believed in, performing for the crowds he cherished, and trusting an orca he had spent more than a decade calling his partner. But was his death preventable? The reports say yes. The ignored warnings say yes. The history buried in papers and silenced trainers say yes. What killed Peter was not just a 5,400-pound predator. It was negligence, repetition, a system that valued performance over caution and silence. About safety. Peter's sister, in a quiet interview after the funeral, said only one thing. He warned them. They didn't listen. Today, candles still remain outside the gates of Oceanic World. The lights of the show have come back on. But something changed that day. A question was planted. A question the world still struggles with. Are we protecting animals or using them? Are we honoring trainers or exploiting their passion? And how many more lives will it take before we choose to listen? If you were touched by this story, consider subscribing to the channel. We bring you true and unpublished documentaries about animal attacks, stories that deserve to be heard, remembered, and learned. Like, share, comment below with your thoughts, and as always, stay curious, stay safe. See you next time.